Hello, today I'd like to share with you some personal stories. When I faced my fears, it really changed my life. Because fears is like weeds in the garden. When you don't pull them out, they tend to grow and they tend to spread to other areas in the garden of your life. Kind of like cancer, right? The opposite of that, confidence. When you have confidence in one area and you use that confidence, it helps you to grow in other areas of your life. And so finding ways to face your fears or resolving your fears can be very important in that sense. For example, somebody might be afraid of a situation at work. And over time, though, that person keeps being afraid of that one, but then eventually he or she would be afraid of going to work, and then would be afraid of even leaving the house. And then eventually that person may even be afraid of talking to anyone at all, right? And that's the thing about fears, that they tend to spread. So the first story I want to share with you today was when I was in the refugee camp. This was when I was about 12 years old. One day my mom and I went to for an interview. This was called a screening interview, in which they would determine whether would be qualified as refugees to go to Canada or the US or whatever country that we would choose. And during the interview, the interviewer told my mom that she wouldn't be qualified. And the interviewer told us that we would probably have to be sent back to Vietnam. So if you could imagine how devastated my mom and I would be. So we went home, we walked home, and this was 12 o'clock in the afternoon in the blazing heat of Indonesia. We were walking home, feeling very hopeless, very helpless. And I started to have a heat stroke because it was really hot. So my mom started to panic, and she saw a car going by. She decided to wave to get hitchhiked, right? And it was very uncommon for cars to be there because we were living on the island, right? So only important officials would be allowed to have cars up there. But she waved anyway. The car continued on and did not stop. And so we thought that was sort of to be expected, so we continued on, but I was quite tired, exhausted, and got heat stroke. So a few minutes later, miraculously, the car turned back. I got into the car, and I was never in a car before prior to that, so I hit my head against the car when I tried to get in. And my mom, she whispered to me, and she told me that the person in the car was actually the head of the department that would pass or fail people for interviews. He was the head of people making decisions whether we go to Vietnam or move on and go to a wonderful country. So at that time, even though I was really sick, and I was really afraid to talk to adults, right? Because I was taught that, you don't speak to adults and as a child unless being spoken to. And plus I was sick. But I thought to myself, this would be an amazing opportunity if I can somehow would get the men to help. That might change our lives. And so that somehow seemed to really gathered up all my courage and kind of like woke me up. So at that time too, I spoke broken English. And so I said to him, I pointed to my eye and I said, I am blind, please help me. And for whatever reason, he was touched. He didn't say much because he was a very quiet guy, and I was told that he was very cold. He had a very stern facial expression all the time. So all he asked was just our ID. That's all he asked. Oh, and then where we lived. So we didn't think much of it. We thought, oh, you know, that was probably another fail. But the next day, he was able to locate us, and he called us up, had a conversation, then he passed the interview for us. So if that wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting in Canada today. I would probably be one of the blind beggars in Vietnam. Who knows, right? But that tells you the amazing power of letting go of your fear, even though you might really feel it a lot, and do what you need to do, but also to pay attention, because sometimes opportunities like that, they'll come by, and if we don't pay attention, they tend to go away and nothing really significant happen. So another story that really changed a lot of things for me was, so I used to do workshops at the university, and one of the women who attended my workshop, she happened at that time, she happened to be in the committee of a local TED Talk. So she wrote to me and she said, oh, you know, I really think you should apply to be a TED Talk speaker this year. So I felt flattered, and I decided to apply. I didn't really think much of it, right? And so a few weeks later, I heard back and they accepted my application. Wow, I really thought, what would that really mean? So it would mean I would speak in front of hundreds of people, and then it would be videotaped. And that really scared me a lot. I only graduated from my master's degree. I was only a counselor for a year at that time. So I was really new in my career. I couldn't think of what I would say and what I would share. And then so I decided to face my fear and really take advantage of this wonderful opportunity. So I really thought about what message I really wanted to share with people, with the world. What did I really wanted to share? And I wanted to share something from my heart, right? And after I decided on the content, and I wrote down my speech, for the next several weeks I would practice. I would practice in the living room. I would practice in the bedroom. I even practiced when I took the dog out. Basically, my intention was to really calm down my stress response so that when I actually would speak, I wouldn't be so nervous that I would forget, and I wouldn't be able. And so I wanted to practice to the point where I could then be calm enough to really speak from my heart. Well, that day finally came. And I was still afraid, not as much, but still afraid a lot. And I remember sitting among the TED Talk speakers. A few days before that, I read the bios, and these people achieved this and achieved that, and I felt like I haven't really achieved anything significant in my life. And I also sat beside these two men, and they talked about hockey the night before. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, here I am trying to share a personal story soon. That really discouraged me as well, and I wanted to run away, but by that time it was too late. And so soon I spoke, and I'm going to link the TED Talk down here in the description. But I was nervous, but not too nervous that I couldn't speak. And you know, that talk, it has brought me so many opportunities in my life, whether it be for my different jobs that I apply later on and things like that. Also, you know, if I stopped myself because of my fear, I wouldn't be able to reach thousands of people since then. I remember there was a really powerful email or message from a man who wrote to me, and he said that prior to listening to my talk, he was actually feeling suicidal and was quite depressed. And something about my talk that really changed the way he the way he was seeing life. So he thanked me for that. So if you could imagine, even if I even if I could change one person's life, right? So yeah, so don't let your fear stop you. So finally, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go backward a little bit, and I'll tell you another moment in my life that almost stopped me dead on the track. So I was in the counseling program in Simon Fraser University, and I was probably one of the worst counseling students there because I did not. I was in McMaster before that, and I did my BA. And McMaster, they didn't really have counseling courses for me to take. So when I did my master's, I actually had very few counseling experiences and skills. And we had to videotape ourselves to do counseling for other students. And the fact that I was being watched and I would be judged, all of that like gave me intense performance anxiety. And as you know, when you're anxious, you're not able to think clearly. And I would be talking during counseling for my role, and I would be so anxious thinking about what I would say, what would other people think of me if I say this and da da da. And so that was an important course at the end of the year. And the professor said to me that she may fail me for the course. And she even said this. She said that, you know, if I was the client, I wouldn't come back to you. Oh, and that devastated me because up until that point, I worked really hard, right, trying to fulfill my dream. And now someone said, you know, you're probably not going to get your dream fulfilled, right? So it felt like all the building blocks that I was building on, they all collapsed. That's how it felt to me, and I was very upset. Because it's one thing to work towards your dream, it's another thing to be told that you might not be able to fulfill it. And I actually believed her because I knew I wasn't doing well. So it wasn't just her perception, it was the reality for me at that time. So I went to speak to another professor, and I remember sitting in there crying because the idea of failing a course and then the idea of not ever become a counselor, just like I thought I would, really upset me. And that professor said to me, you know, those people who struggle in the beginning, they tend to shine later on. And that really stuck with me. So from that moment on, at that, I decided to do whatever I could to improve myself, to be the best counselor that I could be. So I went back, I talked to that professor, I begged her for another chance. I did the video again, but this time I was doing with a best friend. And doing with a best friend when no one was around seemed to calm me, and I seemed to be able to listen to her. It wasn't a great video, but it was a pass. And so she passed me. But from that day on, I would watch a lot of videos from people doing therapy, right? People talking about therapy. I would attend like all kinds of workshops and webinars, and at that time there were no webinars, seminars and those things. I was taking, reading books and things like that, because the way I thought of it was, no one is really born to be a great counselor. You just have to keep practicing, keep learning from other people. And I'm so glad I did, because since then I've worked with thousands of people, and so many countless times I've heard about, you know, how I really made a big difference in their lives. And yeah, so if you imagine if I stopped myself about 12 years ago, I wouldn't even have the confidence to sit here and share with you these stories today. So before we end today, I want to share with you this little story. There was a man who who went to see elephants in kind of like a zoo or someplace, you know, where they do elephant shows. And he was really surprised to see that so each elephant was tied by a small rope, right? Tied by a small rope in the front of their legs. And he noticed that the elephant would not go beyond this rope, even though the elephant was huge, right? Could easily break free from the rope. So he talked to the trainer, and the trainer said that when the elephant was very young and very small, they were tied to this this rope, and then eventually the elephant came to be conditioned, and they came to believe that they could not break free from this rope, even though they totally could. And that's the thing, you know, often we are held by the rope of our fears, by the rope of people's expectations, by the rope of our preconceived notions about who we could be. And so break free from the rope and let your life live a free life, and not let the fears or things like that stop you. So thanks for tuning in, and I will talk again to you next time. Bye bye.